The best jig head ever made. Now, I probably need to tell you a bit of backstory on this so everything makes sense, and it also lets you know that I might be a little bit biased, but I genuinely believe this is the best jig head ever made. Now, the backstory is, one day I'm walking down the street, I get a call from my business partner. He says, "Hey, we have an opportunity to work with a CAD designer that's been designing jig heads and fishing equipment for years, and we are going to be able to design a jig head from the ground up, exactly the way we want it." I thought, well, that sounds pretty cool, but like, how much can you really do with a jig head? But then I started thinking, I've fished all over the world, and one of the strange things about jig heads is they seem quite simple, a bit of lead on the end of a hook. But whether I can go to Canada or America or Australia or UK or New Zealand, I constantly find different shapes and different styles of jig heads, often when you're actually chasing the exact same fish just in a different country. And through having that experience, I found certain components and certain ways that jig heads were designed, that this part of the design was great in the US, and then the ones I buy in Australia, this part of the design was better. And I kind of thought, well, here's an opportunity to actually take all those design elements that I really like about all the different jig heads I've used throughout the world and sort of combine them into one jig head. And so that's what we started on the path of doing. I tell you, it was a journey that I really didn't expect it to be as complicated as it was. I thought it was just a jig head. I even ended up going out and buying a really expensive pair of digital calipers where I could measure every bit of the component and the hooks and every little ridge on the jig head, just to make sure that when I was communicating with the designers, that we were getting the message across and getting exactly what we wanted. And in fact, the whole design process took about 6 months. But I would say within the first month, we already had a jig head that, when I compared it to every other jig head I've ever used, was vastly superior. The next probably 4 to 5 months was actually just about improving upon our original design. Like, we weren't trying to make it better than other jig heads. We were now trying to make our jig head better than our jig head. It involved a lot of back and forth, shipments of samples around the world, constantly looking at designs and getting up in the middle of the night so I could respond to the CAD designer so that he could have something ready for me the next day. But in the end, we have designed something that has one of the sharpest hooks, one of the strongest hooks, and a system of ridges and plastic keeping built into this jig head, which holds plastics not only a little bit better, but so much better than any jig head I've ever used. And it works on both equally well on both types of plastic. So it works well on the Plastisol style plastics or the Z-Man TPE style plastics. It doesn't matter. We wanted one jig head that would work on everything. I know I've often used the two different types of jig heads for the two different types of plastics. This one works equally well on all of them. And all of our testing exceeded the ability of any other jig head to hold the plastic. And I don't know, it was a pretty cool journey. So let me just grab one of these jig heads and I'll sort of take you through some of the design elements. So the first thing we did go with a bullet shape. Now, there's a few different shapes jig heads I use, but as I travel around the world, I find the bullet shape is one of the more popular shapes. And just like a bullet is designed to track through the air perfectly symmetrically, that's kind of the way we want our jig head in this case to be tracking as well. So we actually designed the head of the jig head on a basic bullet. The other thing we did is we made sure that we got a top quality hook. In this case, we're using a Mustad hook. And importantly, the eye of the hook is fully closed. So it's bent so that the metal comes around and meets again. So you don't have that opportunity if you tie sort of a loop knot. Your line won't sneak out like it will in some of the cheaper jig heads. Now, the other thing, and probably the most key element of this jig head, and where it is the most unique and what we spent the most time designing, is the series of ridges and the plastic holder on the hook. So first of all, we designed a series of ridges which are sharper and stronger and more pronounced than any jig head that we studied when we were looking at all the different jig heads, and certainly more than any one that I've ever used. But the plastic still slips on without a problem. It doesn't cause any problems with the plastic getting on. The other thing we've done is we created a little bait keeper nub or lug. Not sure exactly what you call it. The bait keeper nub is at the bottom of the hook, And the reason we've gone with this design is when you thread a plastic on, and then you eventually sort of bring it through the plastic, the hook itself provides a natural resistance to the plastic sliding off. But what often happens, and you'll know if you've had a short take or a fish has grabbed the tail of your plastic, the plastic gets kind of squished down or slid down the jig head a bit. So that creates a situation where it's not swimming properly, it doesn't look proper, and after that fish has hit it once and the thing has sort of gotten out of shape and now it's not swimming properly, it's likely for the rest of that retrieve you're unlikely to hook a fish with this really unnatural and odd looking bait on the end of your hook. So what we've done, in opposition to the natural holding ability of the hook, we've put a little nub on the bottom, and that gives resistance on the bottom. So when that fish hits, on the top of the plastic it's getting the natural resistance from the hook. On the bottom of the plastic it's getting the natural, or now the resistance from the little bait keeper nub or lug. And then at the front of the plastic it's getting the resistance of the series of ridges which we've designed that really hold it in place. And because of that, we've done a number of demos, and you can pull and pull and pull on this thing, and it just stays put so well. And when we compare that to some of the competitors' jig heads or all the jig heads we used as benchmarks in this test, they weren't anywhere near the holding capacity of these hooks. Now, if you've made it this far, you're probably wondering, what is the point of all this? Well, ultimately, I have got a jig head here which I genuinely think might be the best jig head ever made. It's certainly the best jig head I have ever used, but I want to get it into the hands of anglers and the general public so that people can use it and give us feedback and let us know if it is as good as we think it is. And the only way I could think to do that, or at least the simplest, was just to make this video, explain what we've made, and then make the price so cheap that you felt like you had no choice but to give it a chance. I've got a discount code in association with Jiggle Fishing, which will get you these packs of jig heads for $3.90 a pack Australian, or about $2.90 a pack US if you're ordering from overseas. And all you gotta do, follow the link below. I've got the discount code in there so you can see. You just add your items to the cart and then you add your discount code, and at checkout it will mark all the jig head packs down to $3.90 a pack. So anyways, I want people to try these things. I want to know if all the time and effort we put into this is worth it, and I really want to know if they are as good as we think they are. And we're only going to know that if some people out there take a chance, buy a few jig heads, and just let us know. So anyways, thanks for listening to me ramble about my jig head project, and we'll catch you in the next video.